My name is Dr. Melissa Hayes. I'm 34 years old, and I study the migration patterns of humpback whales off the coast of Massachusetts. But that's not the name I was born with. And the day I changed it, the day I legally erased every connection to the people who raised me, wasn't the worst day of my life. The worst day was the one that came before it. People always ask me the same question when they learn I don't speak to my family anymore. What did they do? And I tell them the truth. They missed my doctoral graduation. They chose cocktails at a pool party over watching me receive the degree I'd spent 8 years earning while working 3 jobs. They laughed about it on Instagram while I sat alone in my apartment, still wearing my graduation robes, feeding stray cats, and wondering what I'd done to deserve being invisible. But here's what actually broke me, what really shattered whatever remained of my heart that day. It wasn't just that they didn't come, it's that they promised they would. My mother texted me that morning, "So proud of you, honey. Dad and I will be in the 3rd row." I believed her. I saved them seats. I kept looking back at the empty chairs during the ceremony, thinking maybe they'd just gotten stuck in traffic. Maybe there was an accident on Route 128. Maybe. They were 40 minutes away, holding champagne flutes by my brother's new pool, calling me Dr. Nobody. That night, I made a decision that would dismantle everything my parents had built. But this isn't a story about revenge. Not really. This is a story about what happens when the person who was trained to be invisible finally learns to take up space. And trust me, they noticed. Before we dive into how I set myself free, please take a moment to like and subscribe. But only if you truly enjoy the story. Where you're watching from, drop your city below in the comments. Now let me take you back to where it all began. I need you to understand something about my family. We looked perfect. From the outside, the Clarks were everything an American family should be: successful, photogenic, involved in the community. My father, Richard, had built a commercial real estate empire. My mother, Patricia, ran charity galas and had 22,000 Instagram followers who hung on her every post about family values and unconditional love. But inside that beautiful colonial house with its professionally landscaped yard, there was a hierarchy I didn't understand when I was young. There was Brandon, 5 years younger than me, who could do no wrong. There was Chloe, 8 years younger, who learned early to align herself with whoever had power. And there was me, the mistake. I didn't know I was unplanned until I was 16. My mother told me during an argument, the words slipping out like venom she'd been holding in her mouth for years. "You have to understand, Melissa, we only wanted 2 children. You complicated everything." But before that revelation, I had my grandmother. Margaret Hayes was my father's mother, and she was the only person in that family who saw me, really saw me. I was 7 years old the first time she took me to the New England Aquarium. We stood in front of the giant ocean tank, watching a sea turtle glide through the water with such grace it looked like it was flying. I pressed my hands against the glass, mesmerized. "You like that, don't you?" she asked. I nodded, unable to find words for what I was feeling. "Then you should study them," she said simply. "Don't let anyone tell you your interests aren't important enough." That was Grandma Margaret, straightforward, purposeful. She never made me feel small. Every Sunday, she'd pick me up and we'd drive to the coast. She had a cottage in Cape Cod, a weathered, salt-worn place that smelled like cedar and ocean air. We'd walk the beach looking for shells, and she'd tell me stories about her own mother, who'd been a teacher in a one-room schoolhouse. "Hayes women," she'd say, "have always had to fight to be taken seriously, but we do it with excellence, not excuses." When I was 12, I told her I wanted to be a marine biologist. My parents had laughed at dinner when I'd mentioned it. That's a nice hobby, sweetie, but you need to think about something practical, something that pays.
Grandma Margaret didn't laugh. She bought me my first serious biology textbook. She paid for my summer marine biology camp. When I got into the state university on partial scholarship, she sat me down in that Cape Cod cottage and said, "I'm setting up a trust fund for you and your siblings, equal shares. When the time comes, use yours for something that matters. Promise me." I promised. She died 3 months into my freshman year. Heart attack. Sudden. I was 19 years old, sitting in a dorm room 2 hours away, and I couldn't breathe. The funeral was surreal. My parents cried beautifully for the cameras. Brandon gave a speech about what an amazing grandmother she'd been, though I could count on one hand the number of times he'd actually visited her. Chloe wore designer black and took selfies. I sat in the back and felt like I'd lost the only ally I'd ever had. After the funeral, my father took me aside. "Your grandmother left a trust fund," he said, "but your mother and I are the trustees until you kids are 25. We'll manage it responsibly, make sure it's used wisely." I didn't question it. Why would I? These were my parents. The trust was supposed to be equally divided, $425,000 for each of us. Life-changing money, the kind of money that could pay off student loans, fund a doctorate program, maybe even put a down payment on a small house. I assumed when I turned 25 I'd get access to mine. I was wrong. Brandon got his first withdrawal at 23, $50,000 to start a business. That business lasted 8 months. He got another $60,000 to start a second business. That one lasted 6 months. Chloe got $80,000 at 24 to open a boutique. The money kept flowing to them like water from a tap that never shut off. When I turned 25 and asked about accessing my portion to help with my graduate school expenses, my father said, "We need to see more responsibility from you first. Prove you're committed to the family." I was working 60-hour weeks between research, teaching, and a job at the aquarium gift shop. I was living in a studio apartment so small I could touch both walls when I stretched out my arms. I was eating ramen 3 nights a week, but I needed to prove my responsibility. I didn't push back. That was my mistake. I thought if I just worked harder, achieved more, made them proud enough, they'd finally see me the way Grandma Margaret had. I was 25 years old, and I still believed love was something you could earn. The pattern became clearer over the next 9 years, though I kept making excuses for it. Brandon's third business idea needed funding. My parents gave him $85,000. "He's really got it this time," my mother gushed on a family group text. "So proud of our entrepreneur." I had just published my first peer-reviewed paper on whale migration patterns. I sent the link to the family chat. My mother responded with a heart emoji. My father didn't respond at all. Brandon sent, "Cool, sis. Hey, can anyone recommend a good CPA?" The conversation moved on. Chloe needed inventory for her boutique, another $45,000. "It's an investment in her future," my father explained when I asked why she was getting more when her business was already established. "You have to spend money to make money." I asked again about my trust fund access. I was 28, finishing my master's degree, already planning my doctorate. The money would change everything. I could focus on research instead of working 3 jobs. "We're concerned about your choices," my mother said over coffee at a place she'd chosen, too expensive for my budget. "All this school, when are you going to think about settling down, having a real career?" "I'm getting a doctorate in marine biology," I said carefully. "That is a real career." She sighed, like I was exhausting her. "You know what I mean. Something stable. Brandon's really finding his footing with this new consulting venture." Brandon's consulting venture meant he was telling other failed entrepreneurs how to fail better. But I never said what I was really thinking. The shifting started so gradually I almost didn't notice. Family dinners became less frequent, and when they happened, they were scheduled around Brandon's availability. My birthday in April would be celebrated sometime in May when everyone can make it. Brandon's birthday in November was a mandatory event with a guest list and catered food. I told myself it didn't matter. I was too busy anyway. I had research to conduct, papers to write, students to teach. I was building something real. But then came the Christmas when I was 31. I'd driven 3 hours through a snowstorm to make it to my parents' house for dinner. I arrived to find Brandon, his new wife Tiffany, Chloe, and my parents already eating. They'd started without me. "Oh, you made it," my mother said, surprised, as if I hadn't confirmed twice that day. "We thought you'd cancel because of the weather. There's some ham left in the kitchen." I stood in the doorway, snow melting off my coat, holding the handmade gifts I'd spent weeks creating, photo books of family memories for each of them. Tiffany was showing everyone a video on her phone. They were laughing. Nobody got up to hug me. Brandon glanced over. "Hey, Mel, grab a plate. We're just looking at pictures from Turks and Caicos. Our honeymoon was insane." I'd sent $200 to their honeymoon fund, money I'd needed for textbooks. They hadn't sent a thank you note. That night, I slept in my childhood bedroom, which had been converted into my mother's content creation studio. My bed was gone. There was a ring light where my desk used to be. I slept on an air mattress Chloe found in the garage. In the morning, my father pulled me aside. "Your mother and I have been talking. Brandon needs another investment for his business. We're thinking of reallocating some trust assets, since you haven't needed yours." "I've needed it," I said quietly. "I've been asking for years." "You know what I mean, for something important, real expenses." My doctorate was costing me $40,000 a year, even with scholarships and assistantships. I had $30,000 in credit card debt from living expenses. My car had 180,000 miles and needed transmission work I couldn't afford. But those weren't real expenses. "How much are you giving him?" I asked. "That's between us and Brandon. Family finances are complicated, Melissa. You'll understand when you have real responsibilities." I was 31 years old. I was teaching undergraduate biology, conducting original research on marine mammal communication, and working weekends at an aquarium. I woke up at 5 a.m. and went to bed at midnight. I hadn't taken a vacation in 4 years, but I didn't have real responsibilities. I drove home through melting snow, hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles went white. I kept the radio off. I needed silence. And in that silence, something shifted. Not dramatically, not like a revelation, more like a door closing very quietly in a distant room. I stopped calling as much. They didn't notice. I stopped sending the long text updates about my research. Nobody asked where they went. I became smaller and smaller in their lives, and the strangest part was this: it was easier than fighting to be seen. I should have known easier isn't the same as better. May 14th. The date is burned into my memory like a brand. I was graduating with my doctorate. 8 years of research, 3 published papers, countless presentations, and more rejection letters than I could count. 8 years of ramen noodles and studio apartments and choosing between fixing my car and buying groceries. 8 years of proving over and over that I was serious, that I mattered. The ceremony was at 11 a.m. on a Sunday. I'd sent the invitation to my parents 2 months in advance. I'd reminded them twice. The week before, I'd texted, "Just wanted to confirm you're coming to graduation on Sunday. It really means a lot to me." My mother responded, "Of course, wouldn't miss it for the world. Dad and I are so proud." Heart. That Saturday night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Grandma Margaret, wishing she could be there. She would have been in the front row with a camera, probably crying. I looked at the program with my name, Dr. Melissa Ann Clark, and felt something I hadn't felt in years: pride. Sunday morning, 6:47 a.m., my phone buzzed. "Mom, so proud of you, honey. Dad and I will be in the 3rd row. Love, Mom, i.e. Pink."
I got dressed carefully. I'd bought a new dress to wear under my robes, navy blue, simple, but it made me feel professional, adult, like someone who'd earned 3 letters before her name. I did my makeup, I took a picture in the mirror and almost posted it to Instagram, but decided against it. My mother would probably share it with some caption about her daughter, and I didn't want this moment filtered through her lens. I arrived at the auditorium early. I'd reserved 2 seats in the 3rd row, just like my mother said. I put my bag on them so nobody would take them. I kept checking my phone. 8:32 a.m. Melissa, something came up with Brandon. We'll try to make it. My stomach dropped, but I told myself it was fine. They'd try. Brandon probably had some emergency. They'd be there. The ceremony started at 11. I kept looking back at the empty seats. Other graduates had families cheering, taking photos, crying happy tears. The woman next to me had 7 people in her row. 7! Her mother was holding a sign that said, "That's my doctor." 10:25 a.m. Can't make it. We'll celebrate later. Congratulations. I read that text while waiting in line to walk across the stage. Can't make it. 2 words. No explanation. No apology beyond "we'll celebrate later." My hands were shaking when they called my name. Dr. Melissa Ann Clark, Doctorate of Marine Biology with distinction. Dr. Rajesh Patel, my advisor, shook my hand. He looked concerned. "Are you all right?" he whispered. I nodded because what else could I do? The applause was polite, professional, the kind you give every graduate. I looked out at the audience and saw those 2 empty seats still marked by my bag. I took my diploma and walked off the stage. After the ceremony, Dr. Patel found me sitting alone in the hallway. "Where's your family?" he asked gently. "They couldn't make it," I said, and my voice sounded strange, distant, like it was coming from underwater. He sat next to me, didn't say anything, just sat there while graduates and their families flowed past us, laughing and taking pictures and celebrating. I went home around 2 p.m. I was still wearing my robes. I didn't know what else to do. My studio apartment had never felt smaller. I made tea. I sat on my couch. I opened Instagram. That's when I saw it. My brother's story, a video of my parents, Brandon, Tiffany, and Chloe around a pool. Champagne flutes, laughter. Someone was grilling. Music played in the background. My mother was wearing a sundress and sunglasses, looking radiant. My father had his arm around Brandon, grinning. The caption, "Sunday fun day with my favorites. Champagne, sunshine, #blessed, #family time." I watched it 3 times before it really sank in. They weren't at a hospital. There was no emergency. They were at a pool party. They'd chosen this, cocktails and sunshine with my brother, over watching me become a doctor. Tiffany's story was worse. She'd posted a photo of all of them holding drinks. The caption, "Celebrating with the real MVPs today. Some people chase degrees, we chase dreams. LOL. #priorities. #dream team." And then, in smaller text, #Dr. Nobody. Dr. Nobody. I sat there in my graduation robes, in my 550 square foot apartment, looking at my phone. I'd sent 14 text messages throughout the day. Not one had been answered. The cats were meowing outside. It was almost time to feed them. I stood up, took off my robes, folded them carefully, and put them in my closet. Then I opened my laptop and started searching. Trust Fund Fraud, Massachusetts. Trustee Mismanagement, Massachusetts. A state attorney near me. Something had broken inside me, but it wasn't my spirit. It was my willingness to keep pretending. I'm going to pause here for a second. If this story is resonating with you at all, or if you've ever felt the pain of being misunderstood by the people who are supposed to love you most, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe. It really lets me know that sharing these hard stories is worth it. Monday morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. I couldn't face anyone, couldn't pretend I was fine. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop and started going through every email, every text message, every piece of documentation I had about the trust fund. My grandmother had died when I was 19. I was now 34. 15 years of radio silence about money that was supposed to be mine. I created a spreadsheet. On one side, every withdrawal Brandon and Chloe had made. I went through old family group texts, Facebook posts, Instagram stories, anywhere they'd mentioned money or purchases. Brandon's 3 failed businesses, $195,000. His consulting venture, $85,000. His down payment on the house with the pool, $60,000. Chloe's boutique, $145,000. Her inventory expansion, $45,000. Her trip to Milan for fashion research, $20,000. Brandon's original trust share, $425,000. Remaining balance, approximately $85,000. Chloe's original trust share, $425,000. Remaining balance, approximately $145,000. My original trust share, $425,000. Amount I'd received, $0. Amount I'd been told I could access, $0. The numbers were right there, undeniable. They'd drained their portions, and now they were coming for mine. My father had said it himself that Christmas. We're thinking of reallocating some trust assets. Reallocating. That's what he'd called stealing. I spent 2 days in my apartment, barely eating, just documenting. I found old emails from my grandmother. She'd CC'd me on correspondence with her attorney, Victor Hernandez. I'd been 19 and hadn't understood the importance, but I'd kept them. I kept everything. In one email from 3 weeks before she died, she'd written, "Victor, I want to be crystal clear. The Cape Cod cottage goes to Melissa when she turns 30. The trust funds remain equal no matter what. Richard means well, but he plays favorites. Don't let him override my wishes." She knew. Even then, she knew. Wednesday afternoon, I called the number for Victor Hernandez. A secretary answered. "I'm sorry, Mr. Hernandez retired 2 years ago. Can someone else help you?" "Do you have his contact information? It's regarding the Hayes Family Trust." There was a pause. "Hold, please." 5 minutes later, an elderly voice came on the line. "This is Victor Hernandez. Who am I speaking with?" "My name is Melissa Clark. My grandmother was Margaret Hayes. You handled her estate." Another pause, longer this time. "Melissa, your grandmother talked about you often. I'm glad you called." We met that Friday at a coffee shop near the university. Victor Hernandez was 73 years old, retired, but he'd kept copies of everything. He set a thick folder on the table between us. "I should have reached out years ago," he said, "but attorney-client privilege ends with death, and your father made it clear I wasn't welcome in family matters." He opened the folder. Inside were copies of the original trust documents, letters from my grandmother, email exchanges between her and my father that I'd never seen. "Your grandmother was very specific," Victor said. "Equal shares, no exceptions. The cottage was designated for you personally on your 30th birthday. Your father has been renting it out and keeping the income. That's breach of fiduciary duty, and the way he's drained your siblings' shares while denying you access." He shook his head. "It's textbook trustee fraud." "What can I do?" My voice was steady, calm. I'd cried all my tears already. "You fight. My daughter is an attorney. She specializes in trust litigation. With your permission, I'd like to connect you." That evening, I met Sonia Hernandez Patel. She was 39, sharp-eyed, and clearly furious on my behalf once she heard the story. She looked through my documentation, the spreadsheets, the emails, the text messages from graduation day, the Instagram screenshots. "This is good. This is very good. Most trust litigation comes down to he said, she said. You have paper trail, digital evidence, your grandmother's explicit wishes in writing, and your father's going to have to explain where all that money went." "How much will this cost?" I asked, because I had maybe $300 in my checking account. "Nothing up front. I'll take this on contingency. When we win, and we will win, I take a percentage of the recovery. Plus, once we file, I'm going to request your immediate access to your trust funds to cover your living expenses during litigation. The court usually grants that when there's clear evidence of trustee misconduct." "When do we start?" She smiled. "We already have. I'm filing tomorrow." I walked out of that office feeling something I hadn't felt in 15 years, not since my grandmother was alive. I felt seen. That night my phone rang, my father. I let it go to voicemail. He called again and again. Finally, a text. "Melissa, we need to talk. Your mother is very upset. Family matters should stay in the family." I blocked the number. Then I did something I should have done years ago. I stopped waiting for them to give me permission to exist.
The legal process took 18 months. 18 months of depositions, document discovery, court hearings, and watching my family's carefully constructed image crumble. The first court appearance was preliminary, just a hearing to establish that I had grounds for a suit. My parents showed up in expensive clothing, looking wounded and confused. My mother tried to hug me in the hallway. I stepped back. "Melissa, please," she said, tears forming. "We're family. We can work this out." "You had 15 years to work it out," I said quietly. "You chose not to." She looked at me like I'd slapped her, like I was being unreasonable. Her tears were real. She genuinely couldn't understand why I was hurting her. That's when I realized they'd never seen me as a separate person. I was a supporting character in their story, and supporting characters don't have their own needs. But I wasn't that person anymore. The judge granted me immediate access to my trust fund to cover basic living expenses during litigation, $1,500 a month. Not enough to be comfortable, but enough that I could quit the gift shop job and focus on research and teaching. Discovery was brutal. Sonia subpoenaed all trust records, every withdrawal, every rental payment from the Cape Cod cottage, every email between my father and his accountant. The paper trail was devastating, and it was all there in black and white. In one email, my father had written to his CPA, "Melissa doesn't need the money right now. She's in school anyway. Brandon's business ventures are more time-sensitive. We can reallocate later." Later never came. Estelle Washington, our former housekeeper, reached out through Facebook. She was 71 now, long retired, but she'd heard through mutual acquaintances that I was in a fight with the family. She asked to meet for coffee. "I kept my mouth shut for 20 years, she told me over tea at a diner. "But I can't anymore. Your grandmother gave me letters before she died. She asked me to keep them safe and give them to you if things went wrong with your parents." She handed me an envelope, yellow with age, my name written in my grandmother's handwriting. Inside was a letter dated 1 week before she died. "Dearest Melissa, if you're reading this, it means Victor or someone else who cares about you has given you this letter because something has gone wrong with the trust. I want you to know I see exactly who you are. You are brilliant, hardworking, and kind. You are everything I hoped you would become. Your father is a good man in many ways, but he has a blind spot when it comes to your brother. He always has. I've tried to balance things, but I'm afraid that without me there, you'll become invisible to them. Don't let that happen. Don't make yourself small to make them comfortable. The trust is yours by right. The cottage is yours by my design. Take what's yours. Live the life you're meant to live. And remember, Hayes women don't apologize for taking up space. All my love, Grandma Margaret. I cried in that diner booth. Not sad tears, angry ones, grateful ones. because even in death, she'd protected me. Estelle testified in court. She brought notebooks, years of observations about family dynamics. She described Christmas dinners where I was ignored, birthday parties that were canceled, the time she'd overheard my mother say, "I love all my children equally, but some are easier to love than others." Dr. Patel testified about the graduation day. He'd kept the program with my empty seat numbers written in the margin. It was, he said on the stand, one of the saddest things I've witnessed in 20 years of teaching. The trial took a week. My family's attorney tried to argue that my parents had discretion as trustees, that they'd been managing resources responsibly, that I was bitter about normal sibling differences. Sonia dismantled each argument methodically. She presented the numbers, the emails, my grandmother's explicit instructions, the cottage rental income my father had kept, the Instagram posts from graduation day, including Tiffany's #DrNobody hashtag. The judge was not amused. In his ruling, he ordered full restoration of my trust fund, $425,000, plus 15 years of interest, $187,000, transfer of the Cape Cod cottage to my name, reimbursement of all rental income from the cottage, $340,000, payment of my legal fees, a formal investigation into whether criminal charges should be filed for trustee fraud. Total award, $952,000. But more than the money, more than the cottage, more than anything else, there was the judge's final statement. The respondents systematically marginalized their daughter while enriching their other children. This wasn't financial mismanagement. This was cruelty dressed up as family dynamics. The trust is hereby dissolved, and the respondents are removed as trustees permanently. Cruelty dressed up as family dynamics. Someone had finally said it out loud. 2 years later, I'm sitting in my grandmother's cottage, my cottage now, watching the sunrise over Cape Cod Bay. There are 12 cats living in a heated shelter I built in the yard. Every Sunday morning I feed them, and I think about the person I used to be, the one who made herself small, the one who thought love was something you earned through suffering. I run a nonprofit now, Coastal Marine Research Initiative. We study whale migration and ocean health. I have 3 full-time researchers, 2 interns, and enough grant funding to make a real difference. The work my grandmother believed in is happening in the house she left me. My parents had to sell their colonial to pay the legal fees and judgments. They lost their social standing. My mother's Instagram following dropped to 3,000 after the court documents became public. People don't like charitable influencers who steal from their own children. Brandon declared bankruptcy last year. His house with the pool was foreclosed. He and Tiffany are divorced. Chloe reached out 6 months ago, a long email apologizing, explaining that she was young and scared and didn't know how to stand up to our parents. I haven't responded. I don't know if I will. My father sends cards sometimes, birthday cards, Christmas cards. I don't open them. My mother called once from a number I didn't have blocked. I answered by accident. She cried and said she didn't understand how things got so broken. I told her the truth. They didn't get broken, Mom. They were always this way. I just finally stopped pretending. I changed my name legally 1 year ago. Dr. Melissa Hayes, the name my grandmother was born with, the name she wanted me to carry forward. People ask if I'm angry, if I hold a grudge, and the truth is, I don't think about them much anymore.
Anger requires energy, and I'm spending mine on things that matter, on research that could help protect endangered species, on mentoring graduate students who feel overlooked, on building a life where being seen isn't something I have to beg for. My grandmother used to say, "Hayes women don't apologize for taking up space." She was right. I spent 34 years being invisible to people who should have loved me, and then one day, one clear, painful, liberating day, I decided I'd rather be a stranger to them than invisible to myself. That was the day I truly graduated, not from a doctorate program, but from the family that taught me I was too much and never enough at the same time. I'm Dr. Melissa Hayes now. I study humpback whales. I feed 12 cats every Sunday. I live in a cottage by the ocean. And for the first time in my life, when I look in the mirror, I see someone my grandmother would be proud of. I see someone I'm proud of. And that is the only family approval I'll ever need again. Have you ever been betrayed by someone who was supposed to love you? How did you rebuild trust? What's one thing you learned about yourself after a betrayal? Share one moment in your healing journey that changed everything. Drop your answers in the comments below. I read every single one. This was another story from Revenge Room, where we turn pain into purpose and betrayal into balance. Please don't forget to subscribe and join us for the next transformation.